Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by Pat FinTech, the training partner that demystifies fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. Owen Fitzgerald and I are back with another Money Talk segment this week, starting with some insights on what Stripe's latest product could mean for their long-term plan. What would an Irish startup podcast be without leading with Stripe? Then we get into the next big flywheel with Netflix finally getting into merch, before heading south to Miami for the outtakes from Bitcoin 2021, along with a few more nuggets from Owen and me, all right here on Money Never Sleeps. How you doing tonight, pal?
Good, yeah. Instead of busy, I'm excited, and that's where we're going at the moment. Excited.
Yeah, very excited. Very excited.
No, I'm excited to be back chatting about this stuff. I missed the gaps in the weeks. I know we talked to interesting companies in the meantime, but I prefer chatting about what's going on.
I know. An exciting time, as I've been saying to everybody. But listen, What would an Irish startup podcast be without Stripe, right? Kicking the night off for us, as we say. Stripe just has had so much going on this year, but especially in the past week. We talked about them a few episodes ago in terms of their double Irish, the Irish investment being made by the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund, as well as all the jobs that they were creating. Now they're back in it. And this was picked up in the national news, international news, global news, whatever. But they've gone beyond payments now with Stripe Identity, okay? So this is where they are providing the widget that plugs into, with 3 lines of code, I think, into your app so that you can do digital identity verification. So that whole process that you go through when you open up a Revolut account or an N26 account and you take that selfie and wave your hand in front of your face and show your passport photo and all those things. Stripe has built that, right? And not only did they build it, it's been in use for 10 years. And I was thinking of that Eddard Stark meme that you see for everything or anything. It's that one does not simply spin up identity verification, right? And having that little, making that O with his finger. Eddard Stark, thank you, killed off in the first season of Game of Thrones. Didn't mean to spoil that for anybody. And from what I learned from Steve Ritter at MyTech, when we had him on a few episodes ago, I mean, this is deep, deep, deep technology. This is not something you just spin up. So when I read it first, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's not going to be that great. But I guess it's been in development for 10 years, as you would if you're Stripe. Right? So I just thought that was really interesting to see them jump out with that. Any initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple of things. I saw a really good tweet, and I couldn't remember who it was from, but saying that there's a whole lot of RegTech companies going to be scratching their heads thinking how they'll position themselves now against Stripe. And the only thing they can come up with is Stripe can't do everything. We'll be more focused on you because we don't do all the other things. Anyone offering kind of bespoke ID&V solutions or KYC solutions must be pretty worried about it.
Yeah, because this is just
built in.
It's built in. It comes out of the box. One of the things that kind of got me with this, right, is that this whole idea of packaging up identity with payments. Okay, and I worked with some guys at the Billin Group on a white paper on this, on their product on regulated digital cash that I talked about a couple weeks ago. Now, the theory here, or thesis here, is that e-commerce transactions are moving at such a fast pace, right? Whether it's B2C or B2B, e-commerce is moving incredibly fast, or just even the whole online purchase and sale of goods, right? The purchase and sale of goods itself is linked to an identity by the e-commerce site. You need to log in, you need to say who you are, where it's going, where it's being shipped to. The payment itself is linked to an identity by the payers and the payee's bank, right? If you're going to be able to pay for something with a card, with a wire, with Swift, with a direct debit, with Stripe, you have to be identified and there's a link there. But there's no 3-way link between the goods, the payment, and the identities, right? So that you see on a payment record that comes through, you can see what was bought. On the purchase record, you can see how it was paid for, and that you got a full link to the identity on both sides, right? That type of data cohesiveness within e-commerce is the nirvana. And that is not possible, even if Stripe are doing the identity, because all they've done is they've connected the identity to the payment with a bit more cohesiveness. But it's still the goods and the record of, hey, I bought this thing fully online. There's no record of what it was that was bought when you eventually get your debit card or credit card statement or your bank statement, right? You don't see that. But there are technologies that are in the works that enable all of that to take place. And that was one of the topics of this white paper that I worked on. So going a bit deep tech for a second there, but I think Stripe have done the first couple pieces of it. And I would have the utmost expectation that they're going to come around with that third piece at some time. That relationship they have with Shopify, I think Shopify have something like 335 million or something like that worth of Stripe stock now. I think that's going somewhere.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I had to drive into town yesterday for an appointment. It's the first time in town in, God, a year and a half or whatever. So I had a 2-hour round trip. I was listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast, great podcast, and he had on a guy named Harley Finkelstein, who's the COO of Shopify, one of the early guys involved all the way through. And he was telling a really interesting story about where Shopify are trying to get to and how they see themselves as the kind of the entrepreneur store. So if you take the Amazon, the everything store, allows you to sell everything. Obviously, Shopify allows you to set up a business selling something. Stripe integration has allowed them to really scale the business over the last few years. And then if you apply that idea where Shopify is trying to be this business that allows everyone to set up a business on top of it as a sole entrepreneur, if you follow that train of thought, Stripe is probably being the fintech store or the financial services store in the sense that it's now adding all of the different features and functionality to allow you to spin up any kind of financial services company or integrate any kind of financial services business or offering into your wider product offering.
Yeah.
And I think it's that, embedded finance, but it's beyond that even. It's the idea of, providing everything on a company's journey if their journey is in some sort of financial services space. And it's allowing them to build big businesses on top of Stripe because they can get all of the different features that they need for their business through Stripe.
Yeah. It's we've come so far in only 10 years. That's what's just crazy here. You said that about Bitcoin, right? And the Coinbase direct listing and all of that. But it's like, wow, this has been such massive progress.
But because I hadn't listened to it, but I was listening to, I think it was Patrick Collison. No, it was John Collison. Sorry, he was on Invest Like the Best with Patrick O'Shaughnessy there a good while back, but I hadn't listened to it until recently. But it really hit home when he was talking about, 1%, the internet only being 1% kind of finished or whatever way he described it. And, they're betting on the growth of online businesses in the same way that Shopify is doing the same. They're providing the tools to allow you to further grow your business online. And they're betting on that just continuing. And we've seen the massive growth in it then in e-commerce and everything that's happened in the online sale of goods, as you said, in the last kind of 12 months. There's no stopping it. You're left with a few companies doing huge volume of online business, be it sales or providing other businesses with the potential to scale. Then it's incredible.
I know. And just building on that, there's Stripe rolled out their tax product, right? Stripe Tax allows you to get closer to that, and it's just looking at every single part of the value chain of business.
Yeah.
And one of the common conversations that you hear if you hang out with Mark Andreessen, but I don't, is that he refers to the internet in the 1990s and that it was not built for an exchange of value. It was built for data, right? And that's it. And that what we've done over the last 25 years, 30 years, is that we've kind of manhandled the internet into being something to be used for payments. But all the original schisms, schemes, scasms, whatever you want to call them, just weren't built for this. And that's why things such as distributed ledger technology, blockchain are being pointed to as saying, okay, these were actually built for this. And the whole thing that I walked through with that white paper with the billing group, obviously all of that is based on distributed ledger technology. Greg Chu from QPQ will talk about these kinds of things frequently. Is that the internet of data versus the internet of value, right? Two different things. So, but I'm really curious to see what their deep thoughts are about this. There was a very long article on them in a blog or publication called The Generalist that I had open on my desktop that I was going to read today, but it would have taken me an hour to read.
I know. I have the same thing opened, and I saw someone tweeting about it saying you need to give yourself a good kind of 2 hours with undivided attention. And I haven't had that yet, but it is sitting there because I'm a big fan of Mario, who writes The Generalist. So that one looks like it'll be really kind of in-depth review of what they're doing and where they're going.
Yeah, I mean, it starts in Limerick, right, where they're from. So when I saw that, I'm like, I'll come back to that later. I kind of know where they're from.
Yeah.
But also they did get their $1 billion in investment. They put up a number of shares or made a number of their shares available in the secondary market. And $4 billion in bidders were coming to the party, and only $1 billion of those orders were filled by Capital Group, which is a big mutual fund giant, Sequoia, who's a VC, Shopify, obviously we just talked about them, and Silver Lake. Right. And this is Charlie Taylor at the Irish Times who reported on this. Shout out to Charlie. He's a good guy. I've done a couple things with him recently. And
it's interesting, actually, because every time there's a funding announcement, there's product rollout.
That's the way it should be, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good way to do business. Right? You know, I like seeing that as well. But I think they're just going to keep spinning and spinning and spinning.
If they can have 4 times oversubscribed or whatever to their round, well, why would you go even to the public market then?
Yeah.
In terms of doing an IPO, so they'll continue as they are by the looks of it.
On the topic of spinning, like a flywheel, right? We got a new flywheel that's happening here. This is our Netflix. So Netflix are starting merch. I said it to my daughter, or I said it to my wife over the dinner table, that Netflix are starting merchandise. And my daughter was like, "Daddy, it's merch." I'm like, "Thanks, sweetheart." And so I'm thinking, right, watching Money Heist recently. I don't know if you've seen that, but you know, the wearing these big Salvador Dali masks, wearing these red jumpsuits. I'm like, that would be a fun Halloween costume, wouldn't it? Yeah. Get a few people dressed up like that, running around the neighborhood. Stranger Things, the Demogorgon, right? Get a few of those, scare the kids. That'd be a lot of fun. This whole idea of the flywheel, obviously you wrote about it in one of the newsletters recently.
One of the newsletters, yeah. Or, well, it's probably back at the start, nearly weeks ago. But yeah, it was following this kind of, you know, Disney are famous for this. They create the content and then they create everything else around it. So you're continuous consuming content or purchasing things from them. And it's a surprise in some ways that it's taken Netflix so long. Like with the popularity of their shows and the number of subscribers that they haven't yet tried to monetize the shows, especially their own original content. Like, it's a bit of a no-brainer. That's what Disney is famous for. But yeah, so I'd say, you know, that's something that'll take off. You wonder, will it then get to a stage following the Disney model where there'll be a Netflix theme park or some sort of...
There's got to be.
Some of those shows absolutely would be worthy of their own kind of theme park or some sort of rides or something like that. So, but yeah, like it's following a tried and trusted model to a degree. It's just funny that they're competing directly with Disney on a lot of stuff. Now they're starting to go down the Disney route in terms of trying to really compete with them.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was great to see your pal Scott Galloway pick up on this, right? It was a couple days ago. And, you know, he's kind of like, what took you so long? And same way that he likes to talk about the Rundle in terms of, you know, what took somebody so long to come up with a revenue bundle. But this whole flywheel, like you said, of produce the content, get the theme parks, get the merch. And the concept of the flywheel being that, okay, the content will drive people to the theme parks. The theme parks is where they buy merch. The merch then reminds them they want to watch the content. The content drives them to the so on and so on and so on.
Each new TV show, each new character, everything is worth, you know, additional merchandise and everything else that they can build around it.
Yeah. And I saw this concept in a business that I'm working with. And the CEO was describing the business to me. And I said, this sounds like a flywheel, because one thing just led to another that led to another that led to the first thing happening again over and over and over again. And I did a quick Google. HubSpot are already writing about this in their blog as being, let's replace the traditional view of the sales funnel with the sales flywheel. And it's kind of all over the place now.
I'll have to Google that now. You'll have to send me that link.
I will send you that link because, and then I put something together for the CEO who said, you know what, that makes a heck of a lot of sense for our business. This is a great way to describe it. So there's definitely something. I did
that same thing actually. After I wrote that article, it made me think of a particular client that I work with, and I sent them that thing and said, look, this is a way to think about the business. You know, I don't know how far they've gone off with that, but again, for certain companies, you know, it makes a lot of sense to, and actually, like, you know, Stripe is not the same, but at the same time, they obviously have their Stripe Press, and they have all their books and the content that they put out. Obviously, each individual product that you can buy will potentially drive you to the next product, and around you go. I do agree. I think it's becoming more and more prevalent, a strategy or a business model for certain types of companies.
Absolutely. Do you think that there is perhaps a fintech flywheel, right? I'm thinking Revolut.
Oh, it has to be. Absolutely. Yeah, sorry. I don't know if it has to be Revolut, but definitely there's scope for one.
And I'm trying to think of, okay, what are the combination of financial products to create this flywheel, right? And the traditional banking flywheel was, well, hey, you get a current account or a checking account, you then get somebody's mortgage, you then get their investments, you then get more money into their current account because hopefully they're making some money.
You get their life assurance, you get all those things, yeah.
But I mean, it's kind of, but with the Disney flywheel and now hopefully this Netflix flywheel, there is a logical, okay, yeah, that makes so much sense that of course a content piece will drive someone to a theme park. And of course at the theme park, they're going to buy merch. I don't like saying merch. I want to go back to saying merchandise.
Merchandise. Let's stick with that.
Thank you.
No, we're not cool enough for merch.
Too old to be saying merch. And then when they, have the merch, obviously they want to go home with their Elsa doll and watch Frozen again, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. But from a banking perspective,
doesn't really work.
The traditional banking perspective, it doesn't work. But for the fintech geeks like me and you, I'll take that liberty, Owen.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is something about, okay, I really enjoy this user experience with this app, with this fintech app. I want to do more with it, right? I want them to have more of my financial life. But I can't yet put a finger on that logic connectivity between three different products, where one drives flow into the other, and the second one drives flow into the third, and the third drives flow back into the first. We talked about Revolut with perhaps acquiring last year. We talked through maybe, one of the Travelocities out there.
Yeah, that would make sense. Like something like that is a better fit than just another financial product because, it's more natural. It's not, I wouldn't even class it maybe as a flywheel in the same way the Disney kind of model works. Because you want to be offering way more than just your traditional financial services product.
You do. And that's where when this news came up in the last couple of days on Ron Shevlin from Forbes talking about Amazon and a current account or a checking account finally, and that there's been lots of whispers or that this news was slipped that Amazon are going to do this again. I'm thinking, okay, and just thinking about what could be a fintech flywheel and what could be a Revolut type setup for that, I got to thinking, well, why doesn't Amazon just acquire Revolut? Right? Yeah. And then, or a neobank with some modern technology, which they all hopefully have, that will connect nicely into an Amazon proposition. Whatever the study was done in the US said, you're paying $9.99 a month right now for your Amazon Prime. Would you pay an extra $10 if you had a current account, if you had a checking account? And 62% said yes. And, half of those said they'd use it as their primary account. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by Pat FinTech, demystifying fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. Pat FinTech enable financial services professionals to transform their capabilities into the digital age with dedicated virtual training programs geared towards those that can develop, deliver, and monitor optimally customized user experiences balanced by appropriate governance, control, and oversight. To learn more about Pat FinTech, go to moneyneversleeps.ie/PAT FinTech.
Actually, that's an interesting one because it got me thinking there when you were saying that about Amazon. Probably the best example of a kind of fintech flywheel is actually Tinkoff. And I listened to, it was a great podcast. Oh, what was it? Could have been Invest Like the Best. The CEO might have been on with Patrick O'Shaughnessy. But what I didn't realize was that in Russia, you have to, when people are signing up to accounts, they have to sign up to them, physically sign up to cards and stuff like that. So Tinkoff, when they launched, they had to create their own logistics business for actually delivering and people signing for current accounts and things like that. It couldn't be done over the internet. You couldn't just sign up and open an account. You had to physically sign the documentation. So they had to set up a separate part of the business, which purely was a courier business, to allow them to issue cards. So, but then it became like the second largest courier business in Russia because as they grew and customer numbers, they had to grow out and they had to continue to do that because it was a regulatory requirement. So they ended up having a whole lot of different parts of their business, like streaming and TV and stuff that, they nearly had to set up to support the other piece of the business. So they'd probably be the best, comparable to the kind of Disney model because they have
That's
a whole
interesting.
other pieces to it.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It makes me think of my conversation last week with Mark Boylan from Trust App, where part of what they do is that where you have freight companies where you can only drop the goods if you know that the payment's been delivered. And that's what Trust App is designed to do. It's that provenance, that payment has been delivered for, and that you can, automate all that. And well, why doesn't Trust App just go buy a freight company, right? You're driving volume to your product. Now that would be an extreme situation that would take a lot of private equity capital, but it's one way to think about things. And that's it. It's these creative situations of revenue flow driving another revenue flow, driving another revenue flow, which drives it back into the first.
And actually, an interesting one, a side-related one to that, is probably A16 and our friends in Andreessen Horowitz. Because I saw they announced this week, or like they effectively announced themselves as a media company this week with the launch of Future, I think is the website.
Yeah.
And all of the content. And they've always been great content. Obviously, we've talked about that before. But more and more, the name they get for themselves on the content side drives people to them for the investing.
Absolutely. Lots. I checked it out yesterday. Lots of good stuff on there.
Yeah, like, an interesting kind of model whereby the more content and the more media related stuff they put out drives more awareness and business to the VC arm.
Yeah, I know. So plenty of examples on this. I wonder if we can assign my 10-year-old daughter, who did correct me that it is merch and not merchandise, to do a little book report for us on this.
Or well, actually, maybe we get your daughter and my daughter to team up on the Money Never Sleeps merchandise. Merch.
They'd probably want to put something out on TikTok for it.
Yeah. Not there yet.
No, we're not either. We were, and then it got ugly quickly. It was don't post, just record and use for your own purposes, and then it's like, no, access to way too much crap out there. So that's gone. We downloaded the videos though. She's getting quite creative with making videos. Yeah. So good competition for you, Conan Brophy. Shout out to Conan. But next, coming up, speaking of strange things going on, thousands of Bitcoin believers descended on Miami to party and preach the gospel of HODL. This is CNBC on the 7th of June, where this is Bitcoin 21 conference in Miami. Okay. Yeah. One of the funniest things of this, just to tell you what happened, 12,000 people attended over 2 days, all no masks, all hugging, fist bumping still, chest bumping, doing whatever they want, bumping. And because, COVID is gone from the United States, and there were some rumors about like 2 people got COVID out of 12,000 or something like that. But, I guess we're in the clear now there. But they had to, when they went in, they had to agree they'd only talk about Bitcoin. They wouldn't talk about anything else. So it's kind of like the life of Brian, and this probably dates you, Owen, but others out there may know what I'm talking about when I say Jehovah, 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 right? Yeah. But anyway, so just the fact that you had to sign up to that automatically tempts you to do something else, right? So a lot of that stuff happened. Like some guy runs up on stage in the middle of something with a Dogecoin t-shirt on.
I saw that.
Yells to the moon.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And other people talking about Ethereum Max and these other things going on, and they changed their t-shirt before they went on stage. All this crazy stuff. But the CNBC in their coverage of it, which is obviously conservative new school when it comes to crypto, new school type coverage. And, she was describing this whole approach of hodling, right? HODL. And HODL came from some Twitter thing a few years ago where someone was trying to say hold, that they were, it wasn't buy, it wasn't sell, it was hold when they're talking about Bitcoin, and they misspelled it. Right. And so HODL kind of became the,
catchphrase or whatever.
The catchphrase. But then other people started joking, it means hold on for dear life. And then the CNBC reporter is like, well, it said in all seriousness that HODL means hold on for dear life. I'm like, no,
I actually thought it did. Sorry, I've seen that. I've seen it reported that way. I thought, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it was a misspelling of hold. And that's all it was. But anyway, this whole concentration of focus on Bitcoin, I think there's Bitcoin maximalists out there, as they're called. Peter McCormick from the incredibly popular and incredibly insightful podcast, What Bitcoin Did. He is a Bitcoin maximalist. I did something with Des Bishop recently for my friends at MyTech. And, I was talking to Des before we did the event, which was a Coveney night. And, just to tee things up and trying to find things to talk to him about that are going to be funny, but have a little bit to do with fintech, finance, crypto, whatever, because the audience were interested in those things. And I was saying, listen, can you tell me about that cryptocurrency episode you did with Peter McCormick? Talk to me about what you think about that. And, each said a few things, and I started saying something to the effect of, well, you got to look at Ethereum, you got to look at this, you can look at that. He's like, oh, no. Peter McCormick told me that anything else but Bitcoin is a shit coin. That just forget about it. Don't even look at it. And I'm like, okay, well, that's one person's view, right? There's so much more there. But, but that was the whole context of this event. Now, there were plenty of people there that don't have the same view. So Nick Carter from Castle Island Ventures, they're a big investor in the crypto space at the VC level rather than just at the token or coin level. He was there saying he had seen far more institutional people there than he had ever seen in the past or at any kind of crypto conference before, which is a sign of the times. And you know that, very few, if any of them, are Bitcoin maximalists. But then plenty of toxicity towards Elon Musk, obviously, and that's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
We had Cameron Winklevoss of the Winklevi up there wearing his Rage Against the Machine t-shirt with, instead of, what's his name, Zach from Rage Against the Machine, it was the Fed building as being the machine he was raging against. Yeah. Right? So lots of comedic opportunities there are happening where it probably wasn't meant to be entirely comedic, but it's part of the culture. I think it was David Sachs in the All In podcast kind of compared it to Fight Club. It's like, we were all raised to believe that we're going to be rock stars and movie stars. And then when we found out we weren't, we got angry and we wanted to do something about it. Right. So we got into Bitcoin. But it's like, that's not all of our journeys. So anyway, that was my rant. I'm a big supporter of this space, obviously. Massive supporter of this space. And you take the strange, not the strange, just the funny with the opportunistic side of it as well.
Do you know what? It's entertaining compared to the usual financial services stuff that you see that we have to deal with. So,
dude, I'm not even going to name names here. I was at a conference in Dublin, would have been 3 or 4 years ago. Probably the venue could have held easily 1,000 people. And I think that's what they were expecting. There might have been 300 there. And out of the 300 that were sitting there, there was probably about 275 with their ties off, because that tells you about the diversity of this population. This was an enterprise software financial services conference, not a fintech one.
Wow.
But all these guys thought that they were at a fintech conference. Their heads were down. You could see the glare of the phones in the darkened audience, and a well-known fintech personality is up on stage waving his arms around to try to get people to get excited about something. It's just not working. And it's like, if this same guy, I've seen him at, audiences of 100 in a WeWork, and he gets everybody whooped up, but he just couldn't get them moving. Right. So yes, in a roundabout way, Owen, Bitcoin 2021 in Miami was a bit more interesting than that enterprise software conference. I'll give you that. I didn't go to Bitcoin 2021, but I've seen enough of the playback to realize that, yes.
Next year.
And, the big thing, Miami is en fuego right now, right? Yeah. Florida is getting so much attention and so much focus from the startup community, people ditching San Francisco, Boston, New York for Texas and Florida. That was Nick Carter who said that, when he was interviewed by CNBC. It's just, and he's saying it's even got me thinking, right? So it doesn't have me thinking.
No, but it's a really interesting point, because I followed a guy on Twitter, Mayor Suarez, who effectively actively went out and recruited startups and VCs and all of the big names in crypto as well to relocate to Miami. And he's like, come to Miami, it's better than Silicon Valley, or it's better than wherever else you are. And people took him up on it, but he took he actively got involved in the community. He took an active interest in fintech and financial services and crypto. He met all of the right people, and he got them to come and relocate. And it's made it a real kind of hotbed for innovation. And it makes you think then of, nations like our own and other places where, it's not to the same extent. Like you have, members of the government agencies or whatever, but they don't actively go out campaigning like that. It's a different kind of mindset, but he has got some really significant players and companies to relocate their business on the back of it.
Yep. It takes, if If you're going to try to focus and do that with early stage startups, it takes some patient government mindset to be able to do that. But yeah, Bill Simmons, who is one of the first bloggers out there in sportsland in the United States back in the late 90s, and he's been on ESPN. He had a show on HBO or Showtime, one of those, whatever.
The Ringer podcast, is it? That guy?
Yeah. He was like literally the first blog I read in the 90s, and he wrote, every day or at least once a week. He was the sports guy, the Boston sports guy. He used to bartend at the Purple Shamrock in Boston, where I used to go way back in the heyday. Anywho, he wrote a very interesting piece way back when that said, listen, for Super Bowl Sunday, for the city that's hosting it, let's stop messing around. People want to go to one of two places. They want to go to Miami or New Orleans. Right? There's no football stadium in Vegas yet. They want to go to Miami or New Orleans. Let's just alternate every year back and forth between Miami and New Orleans, right? Now, Vegas are going to do something because they're the Raiders, right? So they're going to end up with something. So yeah, 3 cities, just move that around, right? And they're just such wonderful cities. When you think about, okay, I'm living in San Francisco where in August, it can be, 10 degrees Celsius for our Irish listeners or 55 degrees Fahrenheit for our US listeners. I think I got the math right there. Well, what the hell am I doing here? I can go to Miami. And now that people are working remotely, for the most part, things are changing quickly. I've been hearing some things coming out of the US, people going back into the office. But there's, it's a no-brainer. If you can move your company to Florida and you've got a bunch of 20-somethings working for your business, hell, that's just a nicer place to live than San Francisco, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, but as well, it's, this guy, in fairness, he actively went out, like he met Anthony Popliano, he talked, had a good, I think they recorded that interview that they'd had talking about crypto, but he actually went out and showed that he understands the space and he understands what's going on in fintech and tech. And he actively went out and looked for those companies to relocate. Now, he's selling Miami, so it's not exactly that difficult, but he's selling it for innovation. And then obviously a lot of interesting companies are going to come out of that. It's just a different approach. You don't typically see it like that. Mayors or states or counties or anything like that actively kind of recruiting companies and founders and stuff to come relocate there.
Absolutely. Love the opportunistic mindset at the government level. It's always good. There was a few other ideas that I put out there.
One interesting one is not there, and it's kind of related to stuff we've talked about before. But actually, I saw today that our good friends in Barstool, one of their podcasts actually got acquired by Spotify for $60 million.
Really?
Yeah, it's Call Her Daddy. It's the second most popular podcast in the US.
I heard about that one. I haven't listened to it, but I know of it.
Let's just say you're not the audience.
Okay.
No, it's an interesting one because actually it became really popular and then they had a massive falling out because the two co-hosts at the time tried to effectively leverage their fame and get a better deal with Barstool, and it went off the air for a number of weeks, and then one of them left and the other one agreed a better deal where she kept. So Barstool actually effectively gave up. They keep the IP, but they gave up the ownership. They kept 25% of the show, so they get 25% in perpetuity in relation to the Spotify deal, which is a really good deal for them. But it was really interesting because we've mentioned them before. I kind of wrote about them in relation to a different thing, but like they've got like 5 of the top 10 or 15 most popular podcasts in the US. It's a very strong media company, even though their focus is on kind of betting and sports betting. Just really interesting, Spotify going out and acquiring not only a large community of followers, I think they've got like 2 million listeners per episode or something on a weekly basis, but also the massive kind of merchandise opportunities that they have on the other side of it. And then Spotify trying to bring in more subscribers by purchasing these big deals and bringing them all in-house to get them off other networks. So I thought it was interesting because we've talked about these guys before.
Absolutely. Did you just say merch?
I said merch. Did I say merchandise?
Merchandise. You said Flywheel. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. I know. But, it's the podcasts are huge in the United States. When my Aunt Amy, who she found out that we do Money Never Sleeps, and that was a couple years ago, she found out about that. Come back to that in a second. But she said, "Oh, I love podcasts." And I expect she listened to an episode, and then I never heard from her again about it. So I don't think this is her groove. But there's some one thing we missed, Owen, was Money Never Sleeps turning 3.
Oh, do we?
We did. It was in May. We totally missed it.
Oh God. Okay.
And I only noticed it because our pal Rudy from Voice of FinTech, shout out to Rudy, he had his second birthday party for Voice of FinTech. And I saw that. I missed it. It was, on LinkedIn, he invited a bunch of people. Yeah. I was there for the first one last year, but oh, shoot. We missed our third birthday. But happy birthday to Money Never Sleeps.
Yes.
Right here. You heard it first, folks. But anyway, listen, anything else you think that's fit to print this evening?
No, do you know what? Actually, it was purely an interesting one. So checkout.com, they're an e-commerce firm, big. I think they did a funding round a few months back, valuing them at over 10 billion or something, but not a very well-known player. I know they have an operation here. They announced an acquisition today, I think, of a company named Icefire, which is based in Estonia, which does kind of modular banking as a software.
It was I know them.
Interesting.
I know them.
I was going to say it was interesting because actually I met the guy at one of my first gigs in Enterprise Ireland, where we had like companies coming in from outside of Ireland. They came in from the Baltics, and it was this crowd. They'd only just started Icefire, and I met the guy at an event like 3 or 4 years ago now. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting business. And then I I followed it on LinkedIn. I'm connected to the guy on LinkedIn, and then I saw the announcement today. So I thought that was an interesting acquisition. It's modular banking. They'd been building a solution for checkout.com anyway, and then they acquired them in full.
Yeah, that's big. They're a massive player.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we'll leave it there for this fine evening.
Sounds good.
Just to remind folks that we're down to the last few days of the Pipit crowdfunding raise on Spark crowdfunding. So check that out. We'll put the link into the show notes. We had Ollie Walsh on last month talking about this, and just want to see him do really well there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right,
pleasure,
dude.
As always.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you again.
Talk to you. Bye.
Adios. That does it for this week, folks. And you can learn more about the stories we covered in the show notes on our website, moneyneversleeps.ie. So check us out online and subscribe to our Money Never Sleeps newsletter as well. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm the founding partner at Norio Ventures, and I'm an early-stage startup advisor and investor focused on fintech and digital assets. If you'd like to talk to me about your business, get in touch at pete@norioventures.com. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.